Wow, we're like in a new medium. What is happening? I'm so confused.
I don't know.
The same but new.
Are we live?
Wow, we are indeed live.
What is happening? I'm so confused.
Ooh, me.
I don't know. The same but new.
Are we live?
We are indeed live.
Okay, so this is insane. I'm just like sitting here trying to figure out how this all works. I'm really glad to be here. And Nick, I'm really glad you're here. And Shelly, I'm really glad you're here too. This is new for the Writers Excel. We have faces.
We didn't have those before. We just bought them. What's that? 7 Rings. Ariana Grande is a trash song, but I do like that one line about my hair just bought it. That's the only part I like. So these face just bought it. I'm sorry.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Nick, do you like Ariana Grande? We're going to talk about Wattpad next, but I also just want to know if Nick likes Ariana Grande.
Personally, no, not really. But like everyone else on the team and in this office really, really loves her.
Yay! Well, then one more thing we know about Wattpad now is it's Ariana Grande.
Wattpad HQ is Team Ari. Now we know.
Very Ariana Grande friendly here.
Good. Okay. So why are we here other than to share our opinions of 7 Rings, which by the way is a trash song? Fight me.
I don't think anyone's gonna fight you.
We're here having a discussion. There's a lot of questions that have gone around in the clubs that I've been answering for quite some time. I thought that I would continue to answer those questions and give people, the information they've been asking for, but this time with like more of a face and personality to it, instead of just like static text that we always kind of put out there. And we'll have a little fun and we'll answer everything we can.
Nick, I see like on your community board, you keep answering the same question like over and over and over again. I'm really glad to give you this chance to just like flat out say it so that everyone can listen and hear. And I'm just really glad that we're giving this opportunity to you because I've seen you repeat the same thing over and over again.
I mean, the more places where information can exist, like the better it is for everyone, be it across news and updates or in the clubs or here on, a different medium, even just any way that we can get that information out there everywhere so that people can definitely encounter it.
This is good. This is really good. So, so for those of you who do not know, we've got some new people probably coming on today. I'm LL Montez.
Shelly X Leonn.
And this is Nick. He's from Wattpad, the editorial lead. So basically in charge of content management and doing a lot of scoping of good talent and what people on Wattpad are looking for. Welcome, Nick. Is that an apt description of what you do? Or do you have something better?
He does all the things.
I think I summed it up pretty well.
My role is focused on the Wattpad Next Beta program for now. You're correct, from a content perspective. I'm certainly in charge of looking at like what kind of content we're adding, what kind of content we want to add, and also making sure I review like what is the program offering from our side. I'm in charge of all the different editorial coaches, so what are they offering and how are people enjoying the program and what kind of things can I set up to help my team run the best so that they can basically give their best to all the writers.
I like that. I like that a lot. Give
It's
the best
a holistic, loving description of it, right? Like champion for writers everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Champion for writers. I like that. It's I know every time I've talked to you and you've given me a lot of help with my stuff whenever I ask for it. So I do feel like you've been somewhat of a champion for me. You and Amanda.
Aww.
We got to see Amanda, everybody. Amanda was awesome. Just saying. Hi, Amanda. I know you're still watching.
Hi, Amanda.
So, should we get this party started?
Let's do it.
Let's get the questions. Okay, so for the last couple weeks, we've put out there, Nick created a form in which people could go and submit their questions about the Wattpad Next program. So let's just start off with this big overarching, like, what is Next? Like, what is this Next program and why have so many people been talking about it? Nick, can you explain just overall, what is Next?
Yes, I mean, like, Next is basically one of our programs for helping enable the community to support writers and specific stories that they love. That's it, mostly in a nutshell. That's probably like the broadest overall description I can give of it. And I imagine people are talking about it a lot because it's something that the community's asked for forever, basically, that they've always said, like, I really wish I could support an author. I really wish I could like show them that in more than just reading or voting. Like, I'd really like to give along my support monetarily. Right. If you could let me do that, that would be fantastic. And now we've kind of opened the door to saying, like, yes, you can definitely do that. You can support these authors that you love through coins, which is a whole new thing that we've added to Wattpad. We've never had a coin system previously. So that's also, you know, when you add a new thing, there's going to be a whole lot of discussion about it.
Yeah.
So
well,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. I was just going to comment, like, yeah, there has been a whole lot of discussion and we've seen it. And I think that's kind of one of the parts we want to go into is about talking, the discussion that people have been having. But go ahead, Shelly, you have a question.
No, I think that like the discussion is what is going to, I think, drive a lot of what we're about to ask you, Nick, and that is where these questions came from. We didn't come up with these ourselves. These were from the Wattpad community, right? So one of the things that the community wants to know is, what is Wattpad's goal for next books? Where do you see this going? What does it mean to be a Wattpad next author or a Wattpad next book?
So like the primary goal, not dissimilar from what I just said there, right? The primary goal for us is to support writers and give them an opportunity to continue creating stories. These writers have deeply devoted readers, and the program benefits both writers and readers by kind of giving writers more of an opportunity to focus more time on their work.
How does it allow them more time to focus on their work?
If you are, if you're doing this as a hobby, basically, previously, people have other things that they kind of put in the way. We see a lot of people who post first drafts and kind of take this as like a fun thing that they're just putting onto Wattpad, knowing that there's like a greater prize to strive towards, to know that like, okay, I can take this quite seriously. And if I do so and I produce like the highest quality of work and a much better work, I can in turn go into this particular program if I'm selected, and you know, my audience can now support me in the ways that they want to.
And I think we've talked before about this, about how you have these authors who see Wattpad as like the starting place, and then when they get good and they get that final product, they take it off. Me being guilty of that myself. Right. But now you're saying like, okay, you know, let's make the product the best it can possibly be and give you a career right on Wattpad. Is that essentially like what? Just summarizing the program goals overall?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's that for a very long time, people have just like loved Wattpad. They love being a part of this community, and for them, kind of Wattpad has everything that they love. It has everything that they're really connected to. We hear that a lot from people talking about like how connected they feel with their audience through Wattpad and how different that is as an experience for them. And previously, it was basically like, this is amazing. I love it. I just wish that I could additionally like earn an income here and not have to leave. So for that to now be an option is kind of completes a full life cycle, I guess.
So it does complete a full life cycle. Like now those authors who've put so much time and energy into creating this content and then getting this money, it seems like money is a very important part of this whole process, but is it everything? Like what other benefits besides money does a Wattpad next author get on top of all this money? Because I know money is important and we all want to be compensated for our work, but are there other benefits, do you think?
Right. And so that's kind of to that editorial coach team that I talked about before. So the coaching and the support we bring to the program, kind of that's my team. And it's what we're like most proud of offering, that we have all this support and coaching to give people. So we help with things like metadata improvements, changing covers, descriptions, tags. We have coaches to talk to you about your story, about writing in general. Even if you're stuck on something or you want to improve, kind of our goal is to help writers reach their own goals. And we ask you, what is your goal as a writer? Because everyone's different and people have different aspirations. There are certainly people who are more artistically minded or commercially minded or have lots of different plans for their stories. And we just want to know what that is, or for themselves. And then our goal is to basically help those writers reach those goals. And if those goals aren't monetary, that's fine. If you want to get really good at writing like a brand new genre, that's totally fine. We can work on that. If you want to like finish a story of a certain length. You've never written 100,000 words before. Like, let's do that. Let's talk about motivation. Anything like that, basically. And on top of that, there's also a community for those writers to support one another together. They all have a platform where they basically chat and interact and have a bunch of fun. So, you know, they additionally support each other on top of the support we give them.
So you talk about the support that you provide, and obviously you guys are incredibly qualified in terms of providing support, like how to use the correct hashtags and how to write the descriptions and how to get your cover to a place where it's going to be noticeable on the platform. But how have you guys built up a coaching kind of skill set as it relates to writing specifically? Because I know if you told me like, okay, here's a Wattpad Next author, coach them through this, that's something I'm still struggling with. You know, like, what does it mean to be a good, I mean, we just had how many episodes about that, Elle, talking about like the different
4.
So many about like just different relationships people can have as they're working through their writing. So what kind of coaching do you offer as it relates to the writing specifically, and how have you built that skill set on your team?
So that's kind of, as I mentioned in the club posts as well, the coaching that we offer, it's not line editing. Some people have asked about that. It's broader, and it's usually tackling larger writing problems or more closer to like narrative problems. So this can come up all the time where someone is stuck. They have a particular opening and they're like, I don't know, is this the most compelling opening? And we'll take a look and be like, maybe, but I'm not sure if it is actually the most compelling opening. Could we make it more compelling by, you know, making sure that we introduce the stakes a little bit earlier as compared to when you're introducing them several chapters later? That would be an example of talking about coaching. Or you might pull a particular scene with them and go over it and just be like, you picked these kind of descriptive words here. Maybe you're like mixing your metaphors a little bit, or you know, your tone is off or kind of keeps changing. This is the kind of thing that should look like. Does this happen anywhere else in your story? Like, can you go back and take a look across it and try to level up as a writer in general? In terms of the skill set, everyone who's on the team has worked in this field for quite some time in their own ways. So, you know, we have some people who worked with volunteer organizations that teach people. We have some who worked in the publishing industry previously. You have myself who's been doing this here for a very long time. So that's kind of what we do there. And then we additionally have a bunch of training on our side and a bunch of additional resources that we bring in. Plus, we have basically all the mind of Wattpad. We have a lot of people who work here with a lot of collective experience, and all of them kind of come together to say, here's what I've learned throughout my process at wherever, and here's how you can help someone, and here's, you know, a tip that I would give in this situation.
So it kind of sounds like Wattpad wants to be your critique partner. So not only will they pay you, but they also want to be your critique partner in order to like get better at finding how your book is going to reach its best audience.
Certainly, and can do a whole lot more than that. We also talk a lot about just like what it means to be a writer. There's a lot of motivation stuff that goes in there. There's a lot of planning and organizing your time and better understanding how to write content in general. You know, there's also authors. There are some authors as well who just feel very confident in their writing, and perhaps they've been doing this for a very long time. They're very experienced, and they just want to talk to someone and do a gut check, right? Does this idea sound too off the wall? Okay, great, sounds good. I'm good there. But then the coaching that they might need more of is like, hey, I come from a very experienced background. We didn't deal in this whole like Wattpad and social media and all that stuff. I'd love if you could help me out with how to market my story better, or how to interact with an audience better, or other things I can do. Or we can even have cases where people are like, I want to be a mentor as well to other people. You know, what are your tips on doing that? So there's a wide variety of things that coaches can help you out with.
I just have to say, I think my Pitch Wars mentors are watching us. So if they are, hi guys. I just have to say, like, this is really important, because finding a mentor, somebody who really knows and understands your work and wants you to improve, and especially working with total spazzes like me, like, you have to be patient. You have to be kind. Shut up. You have to be understanding.
You hear her? Yeah, she talks to me.
But no, seriously, like, if you find a group of people who are willing to do this for your book, someone who's going to love your story just as much as you love it, why not take that? Why not just love and embrace it? Because I know I love you guys. Marty, Lee, I hope you're there. But if you're not.
What?
I won't take it personally.
But you will.
But
so Nick, so once a story is part of the program, how long do they stay on? How does that work?
So a story comes on exclusively as part of a set term. That term might change as the beta kind of ends, but in terms of like how those stories change, there's not a temporary time slot. It's not like, hey, every story only comes on for like 3 months and then they have to rotate out. It's not like a limited number of rotating spots. Basically, people come on, they are committed to the program for a particular period of time, and then after that, it becomes kind of the author's decision as to what they want to do.
How long do you envision seeing these contracts last for? Like, so far, how long has any contract ended, or how long do you see some contracts going? Are you able to answer that even? This is just my curiosity.
Yeah, I can't super get into contracts.
Okay.
Basically, there are some, today some new stories got added and some left as part of kind of the beta. So some authors who worked with us during the beta, they left as we kind of said that they would, and we're super grateful and thankful for them. They took a big risk by taking part in the beta, by being with first wave people. That was incredibly brave of them. They worked with us really well. They, said their goodbyes, and we do love them and continue to like wish them all the success. For different people, they have different reasons that they might want to leave. And then
could you provide some general categories in terms of why some authors are making the decision to leave the program?
That would be personal between like each of the authors. And
there's no like general pattern. It's been very much like specific to each individual person.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to like, especially because we're talking very few numbers.
Right.
I would be basically outing people.
Right, that makes sense. So what have been some of the more successful genres of the Wattpad Next program? So success, obviously, with this can pretty easily be determined by, how people continue to read and spend those coins. What has kind of, no, you're saying no, that's maybe not how we determine success. So I guess what is success and who's been successful so far?
Yeah, like they're really sort of all over the place.
Okay.
We're so early with like so few stories compared to the across Wattpad that I can't say one thing is certainly like the most popular or works the best. And honestly, the results from the stories have been surprising. There's a lot of stories in the program doing well that are very different from each other. And success for each of them, like it can mean very different things, kind of like to that writer's goal I said before. Not everyone is necessarily coming on board because they want to earn the most amount of money. And if someone is, I kind of also wonder, because I know these came from the community. So like if someone is asking this because they're hoping to like crack some sort of secret code or like start writing in that genre and like just writing whatever they think would be the most successful, like I would highly discourage that. My advice always is like pursue the story you're about in the style you write to, and make it kind of the best thing that you can. I've made an analogy about this using cupcakes before, which is like, imagine you're selling cupcakes and you want to come up with a flavor.
Intrigued, go ahead.
You want to come up with a flavor that like you think will sell really well, but that also makes your store unique enough to pick over any other. So maybe you like try making a standard vanilla cupcake with chocolate frosting, but yours will just be like the highest quality ingredients. Or maybe you go like a totally different direction and you make like guava flavored cupcakes. So people might not like guava cupcakes, and you learn, and you go back and you tweak and you change it. But for example, like nobody has ever made, that I know of, I'm sure someone has, but like nobody has ever made mint peanut butter cupcakes before.
Oh,
and maybe
I'd be here for that. I'd be here for that.
Right. So maybe that's because nobody wants them, or maybe it's because like nobody knew they wanted them until they saw them. So I kind of say like try to find your flavor that matches who you're selling to, and then just see what happens and learn from that and keep going.
Guava cupcakes are a thing.
They are. They're in Hawaii.
Sorry.
So maybe there is an audience for guava cupcakes, and that's kind of like, right. Like
that's your point. Yes.
And now today there might not be, among all of us who live in the continental North America, we'd all just be like, guava cupcakes, that's crazy. But then if you go to Hawaii, they'd be like, of course there's guava cupcakes here. We're all about that. And you could have a super successful guava cupcake shop there. So that's why I'm kind of like, anything really goes. If someone was asking that to try to crack a code, or they want to just be like, okay, I'm only going to write these kind of stories, like definitely don't do that.
Okay, that brings up a lot of really good points about like, so we want to talk about more of what has found success. And so you're basically saying like, yes, these things have found success. Does not mean you should be writing these books just because they're successful. You need to write your own story. That's amazing.
And that also rings true. Like the more success something has, the less success each future thing can have, sort of, in a sense. You see that a lot with superhero fatigue or zombie fatigue, or you name a genre, and like we've reached a saturation point on it. So if you look at content and you say like, wow, like zombies are so popular right now because of The Walking Dead, I'm also going to write that. There's already The Walking Dead, so you'd have to convince people as to why they need to read your story over any other story. And then at that point, if your answer is, I don't know what makes my story unique, because normally I wouldn't write this kind of story, I would write something different, and that's what makes me unique. I'd be like, then just write what makes you different and unique, and write to your strengths. There was a really great quote from one of the conferences, which was like, don't write to trends, just make them, is basically kind of the way to go.
But so, Shelly,
go ahead. What?
I was just bringing up Bloodback Mountain and how we need
Don't you dare.
how we need to revitalize this idea of like, you know, maybe we should incorporate zombies. That's something new. And instead of falling in love with other gay vampires, they fall in love with zombies. They're all the undead.
I hope that's not what you took from that.
That's exactly what we took from that. Nick, you're a genius. Thank you. We're done. Thanks, guys. It's been a great night.
Do your thing and follow your writing style and heart. Just make sure you know who your audience is and whether or not you've met what they need.
So I have a question that's actually related. This isn't in the list, but
you got something in your hands. I'm kind of nervous.
I do have something in my hands. So I am currently reading the Bazaar of Bad Dreams by Stephen King. My dad gave it to me, and what's cool about it is that like he talks about writing in between each of the short stories. So it's a collection of short stories, and there's a chapter in here that actually made me think about our conversation tonight. He actually wrote a short story for Amazon when they were putting the Kindle out. Like they contracted him. They said, could you write have you heard of this, Nick?
Like not specifically this thing, but it sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, so he was basically contracted to write a horror story that somehow incorporated a Kindle in it when Kindle was first launching. And he, of course, received a lot of backlash from the literary community. And this was his answer, which I thought was fascinating. I was happy to bank those checks. There's an old saying that the workman is worthy of his hire. And I think it's a true saying. I write for love, but love doesn't pay the bills. So when you're talking about how like you need to write, yeah, I know, I see your face. You write what you love, but ultimately, and you know, we were having this conversation with one of the other professional authors that we had on when we weren't on the air, so I'm not going to say who it was, but you know, we write some things that we hope are going to get an audience and therefore are going to, as this man said, pay the bills. So, I mean, if someone wants to get into next, can you give us any kind of idea what you're looking for other than just write what you love? Because we're all doing that, right? I mean, at least I hope we are.
Yes. I think from that perspective, I think what Wattpad shows and what the next program kind of shows is that you don't necessarily have to write to just sell anymore. You know, that might have been the case when there were a limited number of markets, but when just your audience can, like, it's very clear that people love things on Wattpad that are not represented in the traditional marketplaces. A lot of the very diverse content people love, specifically because they talk about, like, I really enjoy using Wattpad because I cannot find this kind of content out there. So, you know, in that case, like, it kind of already shows that people can do that. And as I said, we are so early in this that we are very much experimenting, and we could totally be surprised and just find out that, like, wow, we put this story in and it did unbelievably well, right? There were some new stories that were starting with no reads, like nothing prior, and they did very well. So there's lots of stuff in there that just, like, we don't know what will happen, and we're more than willing to try. Kind of the thing that I say, to use the cupcake analogy still, is that you can try all these different flavors of cupcake, but at the end of the day, you still do need to sell someone a cupcake at least. Like, if you walk into a cupcake store and you're like, here's a sandwich, they'd just be very confused. Even if that sandwich is good, they'd be like, but that's not, I came here for a cupcake.
I'd still eat it.
Kind of what I say about stories, right? Like, you can find all these different flavors. You just still need to make sure you have a core compelling story that is still a very excellent story that people really want to read and love to read. But what the flavoring is, that's where I'm like, that could be anything. That could be all over the place. So long as your core story is still definitely there. As long as you still make a cupcake.
So I guess, Nick, that's the final question is then, like, what is the cupcake? Like, what is something that you personally like to see in Wattpad next stories? Like, what's something that you think might help people who want to become part of the next program? Like, what is something that they should actively try to create in their stories?
So you're kind of asking, like, what do I like in stories in general, basically? Like, what makes a great story? Kind of the rule that I go by is I'm just like, I run by jokingly the rule from Bakuman, which is that, like, manga just needs to be interesting. If it's interesting, it's the best. And so I'm kind of like, so long as the story is interesting, like,
Bakuman!
It can be of any genre, it can be of anything, like, it just needs to be interesting. And stories all have very clear core narrative components that are always in them, no matter what you do. No matter how, like, experimental you get or artistic, you will never deny those core plot elements that, like, every human innately knows. It's also why, as a human, it's kind of like, you can do this as an English native speaker. If you write something and then you read it out loud, you'll immediately know, like, oh, that doesn't sound right. I've made a grammar error. I could not read it before, but just saying it, I know. You can kind of tell with story as well. When you try to make a synopsis of your story, for example, and you can't crunch it down to just 2 or 3 lines, you haven't made a story. You've broken the core narrative at some level. You know, when you're asked for, if someone said, like, hey, make me a 500-word summary or a 1-page summary, and you can't because you're like, oh, it has so much more than that, you haven't made a story, basically. If you can't pitch it, if you couldn't pitch it in an elevator in 30 seconds, like, you don't have a core narrative going on there. So that's what I look for a lot in stories. I look for, what are the stakes? Have they been made clear right away? And why am I going to keep reading because of those stakes?
So, go ahead.
Yeah, lots of stories open with just, like, you know, lots of background information, lots of things that are happening, or lots of writers like to hide information because they're like, if I don't tell you what's going on, you'll want to keep reading. But that's really not true. I mean, like, I want to keep reading because I know probably what's going to happen, and I want to see how it plays out. That's basically how all of us work when we encounter a story. We always know what the ending is probably supposed to be. We just want to see how we get there. And we would be very disappointed if it ended completely differently. There's the one that I use as the example because everyone loves it as, like, its famous twist, and because I can spoil it freely because it's, like, 30 years old now, is The Sixth Sense.
Oh, no, you never know if there's somebody who has never seen Sixth Sense and you're going to just totally crush their lives.
No, like, it's okay. We can spoiler alert.
With Sixth Sense, you know, going into it, the premise and the stakes are made clear from the beginning. You are going to find out by the end whether or not this kid can see dead people. That is the answer you're going to get. And you know that right from the start. You know that it is a story about a kid who can see dead people and a child psychologist who comes to visit him to confirm whether or not he actually can see these dead people. So, like, the stakes are set right away. The premise is set and made very clear. You know how it's going to end. The twist comes in how that's delivered to you. So it's not like it hid information from you. It explicitly doesn't. It just tells you, like, this is what's going to happen. And I use that consistently throughout any story. There's just a lot of times where we'll open a story and there's a lot of great ideas in it. But if you ask the writer, like, what's the core narrative arc? What's going to happen to this particular character by the end of it? They don't necessarily know the answer, or it takes them a very long time to explain it. And that's not necessarily the sign of, like, a well-crafted, well-honed story. It's why to your pitch wars things, like, people can do pitch wars on Twitter on a space that only allows 140 to 240, 280, whatever characters. That shouldn't be possible, right? Because we're writers and we want to write, like, 1,000 things. But it shows that since you can only pitch these things in such limited characters, like, that's how you should be able to describe your story that way. And if you can't do that, it's not quite condensed down to, like, its clear narrative.
Okay, so going back a little bit to, like, so you're basically saying the cupcake is good storytelling. In order to have, you know, a chance at this, your cupcake has to be an excellently told narrative, no matter what that narrative is.
Correct.
So here's one question then. This is actually from one of the live users from Black Indigo 7. They asked, like, is there a manuscript wish list for Wattpad? Do you guys have some kind of running list of things and stories you're actively pursuing? So if you are a good storyteller and you can have a great narrative and excellent voice, like, and if they happen to maybe have shelved a previous manuscript, like, do you guys have any list of things that you would love to see on the site?
Like, like content that we don't think exists yet, but wish existed.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the manuscript wish list? For those of you who are querying, like you obsessively follow the manuscript wish list to see what people are looking for. So it could agents, yeah, what agents are looking for. So one of them I saw the other day was like a female, like or a gender bent retelling of like Macbeth or something like that.
Yeah.
No, we don't have such a thing. I'll just put it that way. We don't. I'll make it much simpler. We're just looking for stories that are really, really interesting or really compelling. I'm really just looking for content that I open and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. I want to know more. And I'm a simple person. I don't need complex stuff. And if it's just a story that says like, here's a guy meets girl in this situation, and it turns out that he has I don't know some reason that he has to leave, like I'll be fine with that personally. I'll then look at like how compelling did you tell the story about this person. All stories at the end of the day are about how someone changes. Either or doesn't change when they're supposed to. Those are really the only things that can happen. And so what I want to see is like, who is this person and how will they change? And that's all I want to see out of stories. I would love to say like, I'm looking for something I've never seen before, but like I've seen so much and I love it every time. I'm never disappointed when I go to Wattpad in that sense. I'm never like, oh my God, we don't have enough content on Wattpad. That's never been a concern for me.
Nick, do you remember when we first had you on the show and you told us that there was somebody who wrote a story that was like Obama and Jesus? Like
I remember that.
I still haven't found that book and I want it so bad. That's my manuscript wish list.
Not really the stories
You're
I'm
not
using.
an agent, thank God.
Yeah, we don't have like a manuscript. We don't have like I really wish I could find a story where they go into space and like they blow up the moon or something. Like I don't have a personal request for that. If I came across such a story, that would be really interesting. But on the other hand, there's lots of times where I can open that story and say like, oh, it got too caught up in exploring its world instead of focusing on its character. Like it doesn't have a very good pitch. It falls a little flat in its execution. That's a real shame because that was a really interesting idea. And vice versa, we can find very, I don't want to call them cliche, but like very common ideas and just be like, wow, this is so compelling though. Like I have to read more of it. It's great. I love it so much.
Like a horror set in a cabin in the woods.
Right.
With a twist. Don't tell.
That kind of thing, if it's done really well, can be.
Oh, it's going to be good. Don't worry. It's good. There's a twist.
There you go.
Anyway.
Everybody's already dead.
And only I can see them. And I'm the never mind. Okay. So Nick, let's say I do have this story and I'm super proud of it and I want it to be a part of this program. Is there an application process? How are you selecting stories for Wattpad Next?
Okay. So there is an application process. Yes. We're always selecting stories across all of Wattpad. So like, even if you don't apply, doesn't mean you can't join in. But you can check out those applications. They exist in the Wattpad Writers Club. I believe they also exist on wattpad.com/writers, the writer portal. You can find them on support under like, how do I get my story promoted, stuff about Next. They may also exist in a few other places. I'm going to continue to make sure that application goes around. There's a few rules around like when and how often you can submit. So definitely like read across the top, check it out. I will also say though that the application has the option, and this is like new or unique for us, I guess. It has the option for pitching stories that don't yet exist, because entirely new stories can start in Next, as you saw with ones like Will and Rosie and Crash. Neither of those existed before they debuted in the program. So as long as you've already written a story to kind of showcase your abilities and you can point to it and say like, here's this other story I've written. It did fairly well on the platform. I'm really proud of it. It's a great story. Like I have been able to write a story in the past. You can come to us with a new story and say, that's my old story, but like, I'd really love to write this one. I've always wanted to write, I don't know, a Western romance, and go for it. And you can pitch us that instead, and we can take a look at that. You can also pitch series and sequels, so they can take part. I don't want anyone thinking like, if I have a series, I'm out. You can totally take part even with a series. And you can even pitch a story that like you intend to write forever, kind of like a never-ending TV show, like multiple seasons, however you want to format it. You just need to have a vision in mind. This is what I want to do. I generally think it's going to go this way, but I intend to write this for as long as I possibly can. There will always be new content.
So we're gonna pitch Bloodback Mountain to Wattpad next, right, Jackie?
And then we're never going to stop writing it.
Never.
It's going to be 19 seasons long, and we're just going to keep going. What stupid things can we have them do next? I don't know.
It's going to be amazing. So you can just stop. It's not going to be stupid. So speaking of our crazy ideas, how do you vet the stories? Like, what does it look like for you to analyze the grammar, the language, the overall quality of the stories as you're selecting who becomes part of the program?
So we can go around it, and Bloodback Mountain will be a thing forever.
So we evaluate like individual stories on kind of a per story basis. The other thing we want to ensure, not only from like just a grammatical side or just evaluating the stories for that condensed, clear narrative, like I was talking about, we want to ensure that authors themselves have clearly invested into the story and are willing to work on it to keep improving or make it the best possible version they can, and that shines through kind of in how they approach their story, and we can really tell how much like love and attention authors have been pouring into their craft. We also understand like a lot of the versions on Wattpad are first drafts or rough drafts. When we contact authors, they often have a more edited version that they can provide us to review instead. So that can go a lot as ways that we're just like, okay, we'll evaluate that. We're pretty understanding to know like just because a story has a typo in it doesn't mean the author can't go through and they can just go through their own story, like clean up those typos. That's totally fine. We don't get super hung up in that regard. We can always talk to a writer and say, hey, I really love your core premise. There's just like some weird typos and errors going on in here. And usually they just say, I already have an edited version, or they'll say, oh, right, I do need to go clean those out. Thank you. They'll go clean those out. But we do understand, right, that having a more polished story is super important when people are paying for the work. And that's part of why we also have those editorial coaches on board to really help out in polishing them and getting them that extra shine.
Wow. Okay. So then I guess like you have all these processes in place and you have like you can edit and tweak, but does that mean that when you go into stories and when you vet them, are these stories that you're looking for that people have already like polished and really worked on, or are you looking more for like what has been read and what has been commented on? So how do you distinguish a good story then? Something that's complete with no reads or something that's been read but may need some tweaking?
So we'll read stories from anywhere. Personally, I just read stories that are interesting, or they can speak to my personal weakness, which is anything that's like cute AF. I will read it. I can't help myself. But that's me personally. So like, that's just in my downtime and I'll let that affect my work time. So in terms of Wattpad Next, like right now, we do care about the read counts because we're trying to evaluate if people are interested in supporting a story. And it's much more difficult to do that if we have fewer indications that anyone is reading it. So currently the number that we care about is around 8,000 reads or so, as I've expressed, which I don't really think fits like a massively read definition, at least not for us, but brand new stories that we've put in had 0 reads and have done really well. So they kind of show that it is possible that reads matter less when a story has that like supported story stamp on it, drawing in the readers. So that number might continue to drop.
That's really cool. So I guess like the state of the story then doesn't really doesn't impact it. You're saying that like the reads don't matter as much. The state of the story doesn't matter as much. It's kind of like, do you want it? And is there potential for it is basically what you're saying I'm hearing.
Yeah. And we'll evaluate the state of the story because to us, that's more an indication of like how willing the author is to invest in the story. So if someone like posts content that they really, that in the way that they write it indicates that they aren't taking it like super seriously, which is totally fine. There's lots of people on Wattpad who don't write with the intention of doing anything serious with their content. They're doing it for total fun, and that's fine. They're very likely they're probably not watching this in that sense. They're just here for fun and doing their thing, which is they can be all about. So we evaluate the story state just to take a look at, okay, what's the level that this person's at, and to evaluate from ourselves, like if we were going to coach them, like what would that look like? What would we fix? What would we be talking to them about? And we just generally evaluate though, more than anything is like raw storytelling ability, and someone who has that ability to just like really connect with an audience, to tell a compelling story that's just amazing, that can't be put down, even if it's rough around the edges, like we can set that aside and polish that, but I can't necessarily, it's much harder to make someone super, super good at core storytelling compared to just like cleaning up and editing.
That is so true. That is so true. Did we have a question from?
We do have a couple questions, but I was going to put them in line with kind of where we were hoping to talk about. So we haven't really talked about coaching that much. Do we want to jump into coaching? We've kind of brushed on it. So do we want to get into the editorial coaches now, basically?
If you want to, I'd leave that to you.
So, okay, let's start off because we have one question here, and I'm going to butcher this name. Smeowiniemb.
Nailed it.
I did really well there. You guys should be glad. So they have a question, and I want to put it in because I think it goes to the end of like a more specific area of discussion. So Nick, can you kind of just start us off? Like, what is an editorial coach? When do they come into the process? And when does one receive an editorial coach in Next?
Right. An editorial coach, I guess, is like your guide to the world of Wattpad Next and also a bit to writing. You receive an editorial coach. So an editorial coach is who will contact you. I know that a number of questions came in with people wondering, like, how do they get contacted? How does that happen? So that's who would contact you. They'll contact you through Wattpad. They would just send you a message and say, like, hey, I'm so-and-so. Let's use me, even though I wouldn't, but like, hey, I'm Nick, let's have a chat. And away we go from there and have a discussion about, your feelings and what you want to do with your stories and your plans. And like, it is a lengthy discussion as well. I'd really want to make that clear. So this is very much for us on our side, like a partnership with writers. So we have to make sure that we establish this partnership, which means like they need to know the right amount of information. They need to understand what's going on, and we need to understand what they are expecting, what they're after, what's going on. So there's a lot of chatting that happens right from the get-go before, like, you are not just blindly brought in and then everything's kind of a whirlwind. You get a lot of preamble before we then bring you to the other side and say, like, okay, welcome aboard. You decide to join, etc. And then your coach is working with you at all times. And I would say, like, how often you talk to your coach, how much you work with an editorial coach is basically up to you to determine that, and the editorial coach. They are people, like, they go home, they work, they take vacations. But for the most part, like, you might arrange with them, hey, I really want to work on X, Y, and Z. So you tell them when you join, my goals are to, I don't know, write over 100,000 words. I'd like to earn enough money to do, I don't know, to buy a new laptop. And I'd also like to consider writing in a new genre that I've never written in before. And as a coach, you can say, great, we will try to help you out with that. Coaches then direct you to a whole bunch of resources, and then you can kind of privately contact them one-on-one to say, look, here's the thing that I think I have an issue with, I'd like some help. Or they contact you and they say, hey, here's something that I think is in the story that I'd really love to maybe improve or fix. Let's talk about, you said when you joined, you struggle to write more than 100,000 words. Let's talk about, like, how we can add more content into this story, and here's how we might do that.
So that actually gets into what the question was from our live feed was, do the editors follow the genre that the person is writing in? And so are there preferences when connecting with editors, or is it Wattpad assigns based on X quality?
So the editorial coaches, they reach out to those who they feel they will most likely work the best with in that regard. Everyone on the team is relatively genre agnostic. And as I said, we have, like, a huge brain trust here of people with a lot of information on a lot of different genres. So even if someone says, look, I'm not the best with science fiction, thankfully Nick is. I'm going to ask him, and he's going to just tell me, like, here's what you need to know for this particular science fiction thing, and then apply that to this particular trope. Most of the work that people generally need, I'm putting this as a very broad thing, not as a specific thing. Most of the stuff that people need help with is core story element work, not super genre specific stuff. So there's not a lot of people who are, like, really, really good at core storytelling, but not good at science fiction writing necessarily. And this is probably, like, an academic argument about what genre even means, but Usually it's more about the core stuff than it is about specific genre stuff. That said, yeah, the coaches will generally look towards content that they're like, I think I can provide them the best possible experience. If they can't, we have a ton of people here who can. So there's always someone who can help out with that and who will, at that point, assist the coach. And now the coach knows moving forward, here's the thing on science fiction. Plus, internally here, we do a bunch of studying on genres all the time and tell each other all about it. We present to each other and say, like, here's such and such about a genre. Want to learn more about this? Here's some stuff, so that everyone's always educated.
Very good. Shelly, you want to take one of the next questions about coaching?
Sure. When we think about, I guess, communicating with coaches, I know you said that like the frequency kind of varies, but what does that communication look like? Does it always involve, like you said, you guys don't do line edits, but what are typical conversations and communications between the writer and the coach?
So they can come in, I mean, they're allowed to come and talk to a coach about anything, technically. Coaches will set their own parameters. They'll say, like, look, if you're looking for like general advice about how to use Wattpad, the rest of the group actually has a ton of great advice, or here's some resources. But for the most part, you can come and talk to them about anything. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about writing. I'll also add that additionally. Like, you can come and talk to them just about like, hey, how do you deal with writer's block or burnout or the stress of generally writing under pressure, right? Because now there's something to deliver, as opposed to when it's solely hobbyist. Not that reader demands on Wattpad aren't stressful in themselves. You can also have people coming just being like, hey, I'm interacting with the community and I feel kind of nervous about it. Like, can you help me out with that? So those discussions look like whatever the individual kind of makes them look like with each of the coaches. And each of the coaches is also, I will put like their own person. I don't have a regimented, strict, here's what all the coaches always do. Here's the only ways you can talk to them. You can only reach them between like 12 and 1. It's very much, you go to them and you talk to them about a particular issue you might be having. Hey, can you help me out with writing better character development for my secondary characters? I'm really struggling with that. I feel like it's an issue. Like, my main character has all the love and I don't do a very good job at helping out the secondaries. And then the coach will say, okay, great. Like, give me an example scene. Where are you struggling? What do you want to achieve? What are you hoping for with this? Or vice versa. The coach might come to you and say, hey, look, like, I've gone over your synopsis. I've gone over the whole plot. I think it's great. The ending, though, is kind of weird and has this element that kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, what were you going for here? What was your goal? We try a lot to not be incredibly prescriptive. We aren't coming in to just say, like, you do this and you write this way. It's more about, like, what are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? What are you trying to get out of this? And what can we do to help you realize that? As opposed to just saying, like, well, I would have written it this way, so just write it that way.
I was cracking up for a second because I thought you were going to say, hey, can you help me write better? And then you kind of trailed off. And I was just like, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't, no one, I think writers.
Volunteer.
Yeah, writers in general, like, people when they look back on their stories, and especially when they are, like, when people are very serious about the craft, as there are people who are, and like I said before, people who write for fun, and there's totally nothing wrong with that. When people are very serious about the craft, they're very self-reflective, and they know, and they don't want to come forward, and they don't want to, like, I guess, waste time by saying, like, can I just generally be better? They want to come and they want to say, like, I want to be better, and we say, great, at what? And then they will say, at character development and at writing, like, better atmosphere, and also I struggle with action scenes. Okay, great, we can work on those things.
Is it okay if we switch topics, or was there anything else about coaching specifically?
Well, we have a question here from another person, Niban, asking, is there some kind of program that connects current Wattpad support people to other authors? I'm going to assume that they mean just general Wattpad people and not part of the next program, but I guess that kind of moves into other topics. But is there any way that the Wattpad Next program's like wealth of knowledge will get shared to the greater Wattpad community?
Oh, okay, like that. That's outside of my domain, basically. So that comes in probably, I would say, like, in the form of the writers portal would be the place to look there. A lot of the information we give out in Watties, the informational videos that came out of WatCon, for example, like, that's where we kind of try and share that knowledge as much as we can. When we have knowledge that's generally applicable, we try to generally give it out, basically. This is more, a lot of the answers I've given are like significantly more specific to individual writers and what they're trying to achieve. As I said, like, I don't want to tell people, here's how you should write. All stories on Wattpad should look like this, or the only way to write a action scene is through this series of things. I don't want to do that. We'll give general advice that usually exists in the writer's portal. But otherwise, like, it's very specific advice to each individual person, because each individual person is tackling it in a very different way.
I just have to kind of plug in the fact that there are really good book clubs and communities on Wattpad who are willing to share that wealth of knowledge with everyone as well. Like, we've talked about NBR, Next Big Recognition, in the past, and they have been such a great resource for editing. And on that, there are also, like, in those book clubs, there's also editors, and I think there are cover artists. Like Faye was a cover artist for me. There's plenty of people, I think, within the community. So they're not Wattpad HQ, but if you're looking in the right places on Wattpad, you can find all those really inspirational people who can help project your book forward. So it's not just Next that gets all these great benefits of Wattpad, but the community itself is full of really intelligent and really qualified people.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to go back to just being part of the program in general? So Wattpad titles. So, okay, we know Wattpad. We love Wattpad because we're all here and we all want to be successful on it and find our audiences and share our stories with people. So when you become a part of Wattpad Next, let's talk about how they kind of integrate with actual Wattpad. Like, do they get ranked like regular Wattpad books, or do they get kind of some separate cloud thing that's done?
So currently Wattpad those stories will still interact with all of Wattpad's other systems normally. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I didn't realize that. I was waiting for you to give me some kind of like epic wisdom of like, oh no, but they're going to
Wattpad. They're still regular Wattpad stories, basically.
Oh, cool. Do you think that impacts the, like, because there is a paywall, do you think that impacts their ranking, or no? Have you seen?
That's a question that's come up a bunch. My answer would be the same as the one that I kind of gave in the clubs about people asking, how much will my audience be impacted by the story being paid, basically, which is a fair concern and a fair question that comes up, I think, all the time. As I said, like, putting that stamp on it and saying this is a supported story, draws a lot of eyeballs. Even just saying on a platform that is free, these particular stories are not, just makes people curious and draws a lot of eyeballs. As a general rule, like, anything that is free will always have more people interacting with it because it's free. So that applies anywhere. The one that I say is, like, free ice cream will always outsell paid ice cream because it's free. So you won't, like, more people will probably get to the end of your book when it's free. When it's paid, you probably have more overall eyeballs, even if you have a percentage less people going through, but overall more people going through, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. So I guess that kind of answers the other question we had that someone asked was, do they participate in all the analytics as well? So if you're a Wattpad Next author, you still get the exact same analytics on the back end as you would if your story was not part of Next.
Yep. So you get, again, like, Wattpad still treats your story the same. You still have your little stats section. You get all the same analytics. We also have, like, a couple extra bits of advice and analytics from our side that we provide to them. Again, that comes with working with, like, a bunch of people who have seen a lot and know a lot, that we can just throw in extra bits of advice.
Very cool. So we have one question from the group, and this was Jody's question. And hi, Jody. She's always, like, showing us the cupcakes that she buys when she's listening to our podcast. So we want to say thank you. We love you. But she was asking a really important question that I thought many people haven't really been talking about. The people who do become part of Next, are you going to be asking some of the big name authors such as Anna Todd or Beth Riekels? Are you going to be bringing them onto the program, or are you more focusing on, like, these stories coming from, like, the others on Wattpad, more of the unknown masses?
Basically, as of right now, we're, like, open to any and all content. as part of Next. We don't have a particular directive that says like only unknown stories or only big name stories, I think, if that's what they're asking. The easiest answer would just be that we're open to all things.
So is it okay if we kind of switch just a little bit for the
Yeah.
topic? There were a couple questions that came from the community about maybe some of the more negative responses, specifically as it relates to the authors themselves. Have you seen negative comments toward the Next authors? And why, if so, why do you think that's happening?
I mean, like, yes, we've certainly seen that, and we are providing support, a lot of support systems for the writers while we are addressing any of those negative comments on the stories. So we do work to support them individually through their coaches. We also now have a community moderator who's actively engaging with the comments and the writers to help them feel supported and to help properly inform users who have concerns that come from like a lack of information or a misunderstanding. We do want to make sure that like everyone is informed, and if they're not informed and they still have an issue that they want to raise, that we need to make sure to direct them to the right location, like submitting a report to Wattpad supports, rather than expressing those concerns at the writers.
Right.
For the most part, though, like the vast majority of the feedback about the program has been positive.
Sure.
Negative comments are definitely the most visible, but the people who are supporting kind of those authors by purchasing coins and reading their stories aren't posting negative comments. They're quite satisfied. Anything that reaches like any type of harassment or bullying, it doesn't have any place on Wattpad, and we do remove people who don't follow the community guidelines when they comment on a Wattpad Next story or any other story for that matter.
Do you think that it's taking, so I guess one of the questions that came was that there may be people with mental health issues who would like to apply, but are afraid of the wave of negativity toward that author, or toward any author, I suppose. So what would you tell authors who are like, you know, I'm interested, but I'm hearing that the authors are kind of facing some of this backlash?
I would probably just reiterate what I said there, right? That we do have a ton of positivity. The community itself of authors is very positive, and they love supporting one another. They have whole days and chats dedicated to like talking about all the reading list ads they get and their favorite comments. So they're very, very supportive of one another. It's a very supportive community, and Wattpad as a whole is an extremely supportive community. You know, to that whole most visible point, like there's so many people past that paywall who just love the story. They engage with it. They're always there, and that can be incredibly satisfying. But we do understand, like, if it's about mental health issues or an emergency, you know, particularly if someone is like, I don't know, I may want to step back or like go on hiatus for a little bit or anything like that. Like, we can certainly understand if someone isn't able to like update their story for a couple of weeks due to some unforeseen circumstances, or if there's an issue related to mental health or well-being, like we will absolutely accommodate that situation. Like the mental health and well-being of every Wattpad author is incredibly important to us. And
Right.
if someone has a situation where they no longer feel they can participate for an extended period of time, then they are welcome to leave at that point. But as I've said previously, like the door doesn't shut in that case. If down the line you have interest in returning, we can talk about the situation again and say, okay, great. Let's have that discussion. If you reach a point where you just have to say, for whatever reason, be it mental health, like an emergency, something happens, and you're like, I don't think I can commit to this. I need to step back. That's fine. We don't slam doors, basically.
Have you had anybody who's left the program because of the negativity yet?
I couldn't answer that again because so few people, it would be specifically outing someone.
Ah.
Yep.
I got you. Damn it.
All right.
I'm looking for tea.
All right.
So when you mentioned that you're always looking for tea. P.S. I might need a refill. She has stuff in her tea. She has, yeah, I'm outing you.
Yeah.
I'm congested. So if I sound like I'm like, I'm drinking my little mug here. But you said that there are these big misconceptions that are resulting in a lot of this negative feedback. Do you want to maybe address some of them head on? What what are kind of the most common misconceptions that are resulting in some of the backlash that you've seen?
I think the big one that I would like stress is basically just to echo Alan's words that like Wattpad will always be free, and that Wattpad is free. The majority of stories on Wattpad will always be free. That's not really like up for debate here. That's a company mandate. As I said, like that's from the CEO. He has said this is the way it's always going
At
to be.
WalkCon, remember? Wattpad will always be free.
So that's kind of like the biggest misconception. I think for a lot of people, there can be certainly a shock of knowing that like you've used an app a certain way for a very long time, and it can surprise you that suddenly there is a portion of it that is paid, and that can come with a misconception that like all stories are now going to be paid. It's inevitable, and I just want to definitely reiterate that's not true. Any of the other misconceptions come from usually they stem from something around that, or a misconception around how the coins work, which I think usually comes from, again, similar things. So that's probably like the biggest one that causes a lot of stuff. And just, that's like a constant thing that the rest of us, that we are always talking about. It's probably the number one response you see from the community moderator too. It's just like, Wattpad will always be free. Wattpad is definitely a free place still. There's still tons of stories that are definitely free.
So I think this then, you're talking about it always being free. I think this then kind of transitions really nicely into thinking about how Wattpad Next connects with other programs and opportunities, right? So will you still promote accounts that aren't in the beta or aren't in Wattpad Next? What does it look like? Because that's how I got my start, is you guys selected me as a Wattpad featured author, and things kind of rolled from there. So what does it look like to promote authors who aren't in Wattpad Next? Is that changing in any way?
No. So like Wattpad will still absolutely promote accounts, stories, basically everything, as has always gone on. Next is just one component of all of Wattpad. And that Wattpad will just like keep on rolling with its own promotion of content. For example, like stories that are in the program in Wattpad Next Beta, they can't participate in the Waddies. Though the writer can still participate with other content, like those stories can't, because we recognize like that is a space for authors, and those authors in Next, those stories are already getting that kind of promotion that you're talking to. They already work with us all the time. They're well aware of that. So like they accept that. They all know that. That wasn't like a surprise in the AMA. But like,
I don't know, I was pretty shook just now. I'm like,
oh. I understand that, but that's kind of, as we speak, like, yes, Wattpad is absolutely still committed to promoting all kinds of other content. It would also not be of any value to us to no longer showcase all the other content all across Wattpad. I mean, that's also how we find out about it too. So
what about the opposite then? So I saw some of the books that, or some of the authors who are on Wattpad Next, like Lena Hansen. Lena Hansen just won a Waddie for 2018. Do they also, or if you've won a Waddie, can you still be eligible to be part of Next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
I mean, in that case, that story can't participate anyways. It already won a Waddie. So there you go.
Right.
So what is Wattpad Books?
Okay.
Blunt.
Yeah.
What is it?
What is it?
The answer that like I get to give is basically it's not my program, and so I don't get to speak to it. Unfortunately, it's a whole other thing that like has its own information that's out there all across the platform. So I would definitely recommend like people go check that out. In terms of like any relationship with Next, like they're very much two different programs. They're not connected. Both are ways that we are exploring to like help our writers. In certain cases, we may want to publish a Wattpad Next story as a Wattpad Books title, but participation in Next doesn't mean that story will be published.
So it's just, they're not completely exclusive. Like it's because it's all part of the Wattpad umbrella.
Right. They're certainly not exclusive, as is kind of, that's what you've seen with Wattpad for a very long time. When people publish their stories like after, like they're still on Wattpad. We don't take them out of our own ecosystem.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So, I guess that in that case, so Wattpad Books is completely, and Wattpad Next, they're just, you know, they're connected, but not entirely. They may talk to each other. But what about the ambassador program? I know that's been one of the things on our listeners or the Wattpaders' mind is how are ambassadors kind of playing into this?
So they're not involved in the program currently. They don't serve a role. They're just regular Wattpad writers as far as Next kind of views them. Some of the people in the program are ambassadors, but again, they're two different programs. They can apply like everyone else and be selected like anyone else, and we just view their content basically.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
What about Wattpad stars?
Also,
Any connection there?
They're going to be the same answer again.
Same answer.
They're two different programs. You know, as Jackie kind of said, like everything's connected in that we're all in the same building and we all work together, but they're not like linked programs.
Got it.
Do you have any stars who are currently Wattpad Next books? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yep, there are some stars. There are kind of for all of these, the answer would be like there are some stories in the Wattpad Next program that are in books. What happened that night? I recall like that's the big announcement. There are some ambassadors who are also in it, and there are some stars who are also in it, but they're not. It's not because they're linked or anything like that.
So what if a book has already been self-published? Is that eligible for Wattpad Next?
Yes, basically. That's like the fastest, easiest version of it. The content just will have to then be exclusive to Wattpad. So one of our current authors has spoken about this, about moving one of her stories from elsewhere to Wattpad just to put it into the program. So if the story is currently self-published, that doesn't disqualify it, but you do have to understand that the content would have to become exclusive to Wattpad, so you would have to then take it down from wherever else it's self-published.
Oh, so that means like other kind of comparable sites like Radish or I think Swoon or some of the other ones. Or no, there's not. Swoon doesn't pay to read. The other pay to read sites. So if there is a story up on there, that also kind of must be taken down as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know how easy that is to do. And I know people were talking about that, like if they've got Reddish stories that are currently getting paid, like, okay, interesting. Very interesting. So, okay. So Shelly and I have a question. This is coming from other people, but we're curious.
It's relevant to us too.
It's very relevant to us. Are there options for co-writing and being part of Next?
Yes. People who co-write are also eligible for the program. I think there is a story that has two authors that is part of the program currently.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to have to look that up. Do you hear that, Shelly?
I did. I heard that.
Bloodback Mountain.
Right?
It's going to be a thing. I'm so excited.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, now that we kind of get a sense of like, you know, what Wattpad Next is, what it's not, and what it can be associated with, that I think that really flows well into, so what's next for Next? I've been waiting this entire time to say that. What's next? So what are you thinking? A lot of people have asked, and even on this channel here, what are the options for tipping? That's, I think, been the number one question that is on everyone's mind. Why did you go straight to a paywall? Why not do tipping? And is there a future for tipping? And what does that look like?
Right. So yeah, people have put a lot of suggestions, watching ads to like get coins, tipping, wait and pay, like tons of suggestions have come flooding in. And kind of the thing that we've said with all of them is they are all still very much on the table. They're all possible future explorations for us. That's probably, I should have said that as one of the other major misconceptions, is like that people believe this is the only version of the program. However it is today, it can never change and it can never improve. And so if we explore it and we discover like, super, this does work incredibly well, we're adding in this extra thing, we will absolutely do that. All of those things that you've suggested and a lot more are all still very much on our table to just like explore.
I guess what would
they? No, you first. Go ahead.
No, you go first. You go
I would
first.
say, are any more, I guess, like in the center of the table than others? I mean, like, I'm sure you've had some pretty bad ideas where you're like, well, we're definitely not going to do that. Like, do you have like a list of, we're definitely considering these potential moves?
We're very much aware of how much the community talks about stuff. Yes, like we have bad ideas. So in that sense, sure, we've trashed some ideas that were just bad. But we do listen. So like, since I'm not the one developing that, I can't say like where it is on the table, but we hear from the users and we know this is a big thing. So, you know, if we're hearing, hey, I would use this feature, then for us, we say, okay, we have proof that people are interested. We really should be exploring that further.
So do you think that like the coins are just going to continue to be the only monetary system that's used in Wattpad, or is there going to be an opportunity for like a Patreon where you give real money, or is it still like going through the coin system in order to purchase like ability for?
Wouldn't have an answer for that.
Wouldn't have an answer. Okay.
It's not my domain, so I would not have an answer.
That's forgivable.
Sorry.
I guess. Okay. Well, okay. So we have that. So we also have one of the big questions about next is that like I've seen in the comments that people, and I've been this close to like fighting everybody who I think I may have started fighting somebody, but when they get really upset, like, why is the only thing I see these next stories? Like, why do I have to pay to read every book on Wattpad? And I think it's because they don't realize that they're clicking on supported stories, like that entire bar that we all see for supported stories. So is there ever going to be an option where somebody who just does not want to read supported stories can have those muted or have those taken off their feed? Anything like that?
So that's like, those are very specific solutions. So those go into that whole table zone. Generally the approach on this though is like, we know that a lot of our readers really do value free reading. Even the ones who do want to support stories and do support stories still value the free reading. And there are writers as well who value being able to give away their content for free. And so we're committed to ensuring that like all people can discover new stories at all times that are free. Those who don't opt in to paid content should never feel like their reading experience or their ability to use Wattpad is impeded because of supported stories. And so if we've failed to do that, then that would be a massive concern that we would immediately rectify. But we are always keeping that top of mind going forward. As of right now, they exist in that bar, as you've said, which is at the top of home. So I can certainly understand people seeing it, and that's the first thing they see. But otherwise, like, it should not in any way block or prevent you from exploring and finding free content.
I guess what I'm thinking of, like, if these people just genuinely don't want to partake in it at all, is there any option for them to remove all sight? Because you said, like, you don't want it to ever be something that impedes their reading experience. But for these people who seem to be, like, extra sensitive to it, is there ever going to be an option to just remove that from a homepage?
I don't know. And I would probably say I really don't know what that future will hold. As I said, we have to make sure anything we implement doesn't block people from discovering free content. But with that said, like, if we turn off that supported mode, there may be people who would have supported content who never find out about it, or who don't realize that their favorite story they would have supported. They totally could have gone there, but they can't see it. And so that's like, hiding content isn't really something we're super about either.
So basically you're saying that it's going to stay as it is. Like, it's in a place where it's not going to be flashing in front of people. And, you have to kind of like the ads where you have to wait 30 seconds and then like find the X somewhere on the thing. So right. Wattpad's never going to do that to readers, basically.
It will never block your ability to just like freely read on the platform. No, that should never happen.
Okay, God, I hate those ads. It's not Wattpad that does it. I'm playing Hogwarts Mystery right now.
Oh, God.
And I'm... Shut up. I'm playing Hogwarts Mystery, and that every time I need more energy, that's all I have to do is I have to sit there and wait 35 seconds and find the damn X, and it kills me every time. So no, Wattpad readers, like, Wattpad's never going to do that to you. You can just scroll down an inch. If you can't tell, I'm really triggered by this, you guys. Scroll down an inch, Jesus.
No, I would make sure it's not necessarily, if someone has feedback where they say look, I don't enjoy this aspect of Wattpad, even if you say like, look, if you just scroll down an inch, like that's not really necessarily fair to put on them either. They have every right to take an issue with that, and we need to hear them out and make sure that they're always in consideration. And kind of to Alan's point, like Wattpad will always be free, so we have to make sure you can always use the app for free. And if you ever used the app and felt like I can't use this for free, there's no free options anywhere that I can see, that would be a failure on our part.
So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about like numbers as it relates to the cash, right? So can you tell us anything about like a mean, median, and mode as it relates to how much the authors are earning? Nothing.
Nope.
Nothing. Can you tell us how much Wattpad is making? Because I'm looking right now at financialcontent.com and I'm seeing all this incredible news as it relates to all these things that Wattpad is doing in terms of making money. Let's just say it, right? So like February 13th, latest deal will turn stories into TV shows and movies in Korea. And then it was just about a month ago that we launched Wattpad books. So you can't give us any kind of an idea of the cut that Wattpad is getting from the next book.
You're in the right place where you are looking there. So like anything that we would announce over the wire like that, you'll find that kind of information there. But no, I can't really.
Well, I'm also looking at your stocks info, and it looks like you guys are doing pretty good. So let's just say it, right? Like these ventures, it's not just about the fact that Wattpad Books is good for the authors or that Wattpad Next is good for the authors. Like I think you on a previous interview with us have said that like Wattpad is a business. So I think there is a question of like, of course I think the Wattpad HQ has demonstrated over and over again their commitment to the writers, but there is also this question of like, well, how much is coming back on this and what does that look like for Wattpad?
I mean, like there are things that I can't reveal even for like competitive reasons. So in that regard, like I really can't speak to that. We're a private company. So as I said, you're in the right place. If you're watching like the news that we release, that's where it would come out. And that's where I would say to watch basically, if you're really interested in that stuff, but I can't speak to it.
Nick, are you regretting asking us? Sick of Shelly.
It's not like that. I'm just curious. It's like, obviously, Wattpad is stretching into things that are going to result in making more money. I mean, I think that's a pattern that we've seen. We've seen Wattpad Studios. We've seen Wattpad Books. We've seen Wattpad Next. We see these ventures as it relates to creating stories that will become TV in Korea now. Like, these are all things that are going to, that's what I'm wondering. Like, what does this mean for who Wattpad is, I suppose?
Right. I mean, I'm really glad that I'm glad, I'm sure like our marketing and PR teams here are super glad that you're reading all of that and are probably delighted to know that you're intensely following it and that it makes you so excited. I mean, like in that sense, I'm sorry that I can't help you out further. I'm glad you're excited by it.
He's like, and no. Good job looking up stock info and no.
Shut down.
Go do your own market analysis and go away. All right, got it. Cool. Perfect. So do you think that there's a place for writers who are trying to get started? Like, I think that like there's this question of, I think was it one of our one of the users who was asking, like, there are millions and millions of books on Wattpad. Is it still possible to get started now that we have this small number of books that are being elevated to this paid content level?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would hope so. That drives Wattpad as a platform is people's ability to post their content, to discover their audience and connect with their audience. And so, you know, if we weren't delivering on that anymore, if we ever let that slip, that's really like, that's a failing on our part, I guess, in that sense, to keep using that. To put it in perspective, you know, I can't speak much more about it because this goes outside the scope of my team, but that's kind of my point. Like there's a team for this, but there's still very much teams that are dedicated exclusively to figuring out like better discovery, getting success for all writers, as many writers as we can, helping everyone kind of feel validated or recognized across the platform. They will, you know, you'll see their work all the time. People always take note of like every change on Wattpad, so you'll see what they do. And as I said before, like we will continue to promote content, be it, you know, next, or like the Waddies will roll on kind of in that regard. Lots of other, there's still editors picks. There's still lots of other ways that we're going to put content out there. This is more so, I would hope, a reason to even more of a reason to share your story than before, that you can now look forward to saying, wow, and if I do reach that level, or I do show that my story has some success, I can do even more with it than before.
I guess that comes into another question that some of the readers have, and I've actually had the same question before, is that Wattpad has been doing a better job of trying to amplify the marginalized voices within their community. So we've got a lot more LGBT stories and a lot more voices from people of color, and stories and narratives that just would otherwise have not been as seen and noticed. So what is Wattpad doing? Is there any initiative for the next books to highlight some of these marginalized voices? Or because I know the Waddies actually did a really good job of having entire categories for this year. Is Next going to go into the same kind of line?
Yeah, I mean, that question probably comes up because I mentioned that like we were looking to add more LGBT content into the Next category, as well as more like urban content, especially since we unlocked the US as a country that can access Next, and that's where most of the urban readers are located. So like the LGBT community, for example, is very powerful on Wattpad. We're really touched here all the time, and you saw that in the Waddies as well, but just by like the types of personal stories people kind of share about finding their space here on Wattpad, or feeling like they can express themselves, or meet like-minded people. So that's why we've definitely wanted to kind of make sure that Wattpad is reflecting how its community feels, to make sure that those spaces definitely exist for those people. I don't have any data on me to speak to how powerful those spaces are necessarily, but I believe if you search Wattpad year in review, and if you just type that into Google, you know, we discuss a lot of the growth in places like LGBT, in Muslim romance, and in a lot of the new stories surrounding gender and gender identity. Personally, like, this is me anecdotally guessing. I speculate that, like, I'm convinced that there's more LGBT fic on Wattpad than straight fic at this point. That's like purely speculative. I believe one of our next authors would want me to say that it's super fabulous. I do that for them. But yeah, like, it's a huge area for us. Today is also a day that one of our first stories that is LGBT primary, like that is its big tag and what it stands for, just became available on Next as well. So, you know, I would certainly recommend that community to check that out. And for all those who are interested in that kind of content, it's definitely going to continue to come, because we love it, and we love that it has a space here, and we love that we are able to be that space for so many people.
I think Wattpad has been a big driver of that, you know, and this is something that, you know, we've talked about with you before, Nick, how you don't go by what has been traditionally popular in the past. You let your audience and your readers tell you, like, this is what we enjoy, this is what we want. We want more diversity. We want these marginalized voices to be elevated. And you know what? Genre bending, let's do it. Fan fiction, let's do it, right? Like, in some ways, Wattpad is taking some of these more conventions of traditional publishing and driving a little bit of a bulldozer through them. Have you seen any kind of response from the traditional publishing industry thus far as it relates to Wattpad Next?
That's also kind of outside of, I wouldn't be the one paying attention to that in that sense.
Sure.
So I actually I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
Well, I just know my little brown by heart is very happy when I see that there is so much elevation and so much focus on trying to bring these marginalized voices up into like what we see. And I think you actually touched on something, Nick. I kind of want to switch a little bit. I noticed in the comments earlier that people were asking about fan fiction. And I think you've mentioned this in the community boards before, but just to reiterate, so there's no other questions. How does Wattpad Next feature fan fiction? Can it? Will it ever? What is the question, or what is the answer to that?
So no, fan fiction can't can't enroll, unfortunately, largely for legal reasons, which makes it
Oh, duh.
I'm qualified to really get into.
Should have like thought about that, right? Like, duh.
So that's basically where that blocker lies. I can't go any further than that because I'm not qualified to
I'm
talk.
not dying you, Nick. It's like I feel like I should have like I'm a journalism undergrad. Like I should have been like, oh, of course, like copyright. Like it should.
Okay, well, so maybe not. That draws a really interesting line though, because okay, so you can't put Harry Potter fan fiction up in next, but can you do things like after, which are, you know, very strongly based off of a real person, but they never use the person's name, or they never use, you know, the actual characters, but it's really
You're getting into like specific legal questions that I definitely can't answer because like I'm not a lawyer. I'm not at all qualified to answer.
Well,
like,
and also
copyright or something like that.
Not to. I have a question. I guess like I used to read. This is embarrassing. I used to read. Quiet. I used to read and write Assassin's Creed fan fiction on fanfiction.net, and this woman used to write Harry Potter fan fiction. I would never read Harry Potter fan fiction. That wasn't my jam. So I'm sure that like when you're thinking about picking these books for the next program that are going to have the kind of appeal and audience that you're hoping for, fan fiction is awesome, but it's also pretty divisive. Like not many people are going to read Assassin's Creed fan fiction unless you're like me, you know what I mean?
I'd read it if it was written by Shelly.
Get out of here.
I'm not the resident fan fiction expert. I would hope I don't have to say her name, and like enough people know on Wattpad who the resident fan fiction expert is.
Is it Amanda?
No. I mean, she does know a lot, but that said, like my understanding of the fan fiction community, they're extremely passionate, and as both of you have kind of indicated, they are a starting ground for so many writers. They are exploratory. That's where a lot of people like, you know, find their way into writing, or it's their first adventure into it, or it really gets them into the world of reading and writing at large. So in that sense, like fan fiction plays a huge role in a lot of writers' lives. I think that's amazing. I would also say for a lot of the fan fiction communities, my understanding is that a lot of them don't really like association with money anyways. They're not in it for those reasons. So kind of like two things that can't play together and don't really necessarily want to in that sense.
I mean, it's kind of like, you know, cosplay. You do it because you want to honor the fandom and like the source content. You do it because you love it. So
right.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Okay, so
have we hit the end of the questions that have been?
No, we have a few more questions
from the community. Oh, okay.
The community asks. Okay, the community asks: are the Wattpad teams afraid that the Wattpad Next program will remove many unique characteristics such as access, availability, and the fellowship present within the platform? Like, is this how? Like, so is Next basically going to kill the community, or do you think it's going to heighten? I mean, we've already seen that the readers have had a strong negative reaction. Do you think that this is going to affect the community in a more negative way if it continues, or are you thinking?
Well, I mean, as I said, like, even though we see that strong negative reaction, it's not the majority opinion. It might be a very loud opinion, but it's not what most people are reacting with. I think also, like you said, excess, but I think you're saying access. Okay, because like
that was my accent.
Okay, well, I'm good at having an excess of like content and people, and that's great for us. So I have no issue with excess. In terms of kind of the way that I view the Wattpad experience, for a lot of authors, is very similar to like the small hometown that you grew up in. It's where everybody knows you, you're very connected, it's where you grew up and learned so much, and it's where you feel very loved and supported. And I think those are the values that we're kind of talking about that make Wattpad unique. Adding in the ability to be supported by this local community, I think strengthens it personally. It's why we know people want to support stories here, because they feel connected to them and this space. It is precisely because of those unique characteristics that people would like to support stories. So I really think this is, if anything, a natural outcome of kind of people's support.
Okay. So, I mean, that's the whole point of Wattpad, is that it's the people supporting the people, and it's never going to go away no matter what you guys do.
Yeah, and people do very much talk about this place like the town they grew up in, and for a lot of people, like, they don't want to leave it. Their family's here, their friends are here. It's really nice here. Everybody's happy and quite friendly to each other in a very unique way that you don't necessarily encounter in other spaces across the internet.
Continuing.
I think a lot of people, like, if they didn't have to leave here, which is kind of why they've asked, hey, if you could turn on my readers being able to support me, and vice versa, if readers were like, if I could just support this author and they never had to leave, like, my life would be great. So for us, it's like, okay, great, we have done that. So I think if anything, this is just going to amplify those voices, or this is what happens when those voices get together.
Continuing on that metaphor, now I'm thinking that my querying in the traditional publishing sense is like me, small town Wattpad girl, leaving to go to the big city and like make a name for myself, put my name up in stars, and now I'm scared and I'm coming back to my hometown. At the cupcake shop.
You can view it that way. I'm mostly only focused on my part of it. I'm sure there's small hometowny type publishing agencies who sell themselves similarly. But that's more so like the community experience that people have here. And I think that's kind of what those unique characteristics they're getting at, is just like that feeling of connectedness. And it is the kind of, as someone from a small town, like, it is a feeling that's very unique that you can really only get in that kind of a metaphor. I don't extend the metaphor past that to the rest of it anymore.
Well, so you bring up a good point. Like, I also want to say that, like, my literary agency has been so supportive and has made me feel like I'm part of, the whole Metamorphosis family. And then Owl Hollow, the publisher, like, we have had, how many people on the show have been connected to Owl Hollow already? Three or four? We had Darby and
Olivia, Amy, Stephanie, four.
Amy, Stephanie are Metamorphosis. But, again, like, Owl Hollow's a mid-sized publisher, and they have developed me probably as much as Wattpad has. So just because you move to something different doesn't mean that you can't get, like, that same kind of feeling of inclusiveness and support. So
and as I said,
stick up for my people.
And as I said, the door doesn't close in that regard, right? Much like a hometown, where if you were to leave, your family will say, like, hey, the door's open anytime if you come back. We're very similar that way. If you come back and you say, look, I'm still interested in doing something here, that's totally fine. As we answered above with that self-publishing question, like, it's not a problem to come on back and come talk to us again as you see fit.
So sounds like you guys are really trying to address writers at varying stages of their careers, right? Like, you want the people who are already established and maybe are looking to try something new. You want the people who are just starting out and have the reads and have that kind of readability. Like, there's a very wide range of writers who are part of the Wattpad Next program.
Mm-hmm. Personally, like, I want everyone to be a part of this. I want everyone and anyone, as I've kind of said, like, I'm looking for you. And I definitely want to make sure that's clear too, because a lot of the framing of the questions I've gotten in the community seem to be coming from a space of, like, will I be disqualified if I'm not X? And so I do want to make that clear, like, write about what you love and be the type of writer that you are at whatever level you are. And that's totally fine. Do your best thing and focus on you, and it won't disqualify you. If you love your stories, and that's clear in how you interact with them, it's clear in how you write, it's clear in how you interact with the platform. If you love connecting with people, like, we will see that, and that will stand out to us when we evaluate that content, not whether or not you are previously published or anything like that.
So that kind of goes with another question that somebody asked, is like, what can you do to make yourself more noticeable? So if you love your story and you're writing your best story that you want to put out there, is there anything you can do in order to help get yourself more recognized within Wattpad Next, like within the application process? So it sounds like that's what you're saying, Nick, is one of the things you can do is to actually be an engaged member of the community, someone who responds to comments.
Yeah, we do evaluate. So I posted about this when I said things we're looking at. And I did mention a bunch of, and I've talked about it here, like a bunch of the editorial and all that storytelling stuff and condensing it and so on. I'm looking for how does someone pitch their story in that application. So if you want to improve in that, make sure that you can write it within a log line of like 2 or 3 sentences or even 1 sentence, and you definitely know what it's about and you make all those things clear. But I think the part that I want to make sure writers don't undervalue is how much they clearly want to be a part of kind of selling their story to the community. I need to see from them, and we love to see from them that they are engaged in the community, that they're definitely a part of it, that they respond to comments, they have a great audience, they work really well with their audience. Because if you are really connected with your audience will of course want to support you. And if you are really connected with your own story and you clearly are invested in it, you're going to want to put in the work and be able to handle the working on your story and the stress that can come with working on content and editing content, or even just the added pressure of people are now paying for my story, and what does that mean about it? If we can tell by how you interact with the community and how you write that you look like the type of person who is definitely committed to both kind of the Wattpad community at large and also your own content, then that definitely plays very favorably.
Yeah, that actually kind of goes along with one of the questions we have here. Black Indigo is saying, so once you've kind of figured out who's going to be a good person and a good fit, is there ever going to be a cap on the amount of stories that you put into the Wattpad Next program? Because how many are there now? And then, bless you, how many are there now? And then how many are you guys planning on having? Is it going to increase, or is there a certain number you want to keep it at?
I don't have like a specific number in that regard, especially because, again, we're super early days. So we're just kind of like expanding it slowly and seeing what happens. As I said before, though, like the majority of stories will always be free. So you can take that as you like. We are just slowly kind of adding in stories as we want. And we're making sure that we are diverse in those selections before we start adding more of the same. So we want to make sure we have great representation across all the genres, across various age groups, across various different voices, different spectrum of sexuality, of gender, all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that we are representing the kinds of voices that are on Wattpad before. So in that regard, like, I guess there's not really a cap, but we just want to make sure that we have a diverse array of content before we start adding even more of the same type of content. That said, like, no, I don't know what that specific number would be. And but I will say for now, like, there are certainly a limited number of spots. We just continue to increase that number over time.
How many are there now?
Across all 3 languages.
Oh, 3 languages. Ooh.
Just in English. In English, I think there's something like 25 or 30 that are in I mean, you could just count them in the carousel, I guess. It's exactly that many. In Spanish, I think there's something like 15, maybe 15 or 20, somewhere in there. And then in Tagalog, there's a handful as well for the Filipino community.
Ooh, are any of these books translations of each other, or are they just, nope. Tagalog author writing Tagalog stories and for the Tagalog audience? Very cool.
Same with the Spanish community. It's Spanish authors writing Spanish stories for the Spanish community.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, is there ever an opportunity for like translations? Would anyone ever consider, like, if a story was very popular in Spanish, then translating it into Tagalog or English?
Yes, I would certainly say that that's a possibility. Like I said, we're open to all stories. And if we have a story in Spanish that's doing really well and the author has translated it or desires to translate it, they can do that, and then we can talk about whether or not we'd want to see it in that language as well.
Oh, okay, so it wouldn't be something that Wattpad actually like did and actively pursued yet.
No, not that I'm thinking.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah. I know there are authors who already we have lots of bilingual or multilingual authors, so I know there are people who write both in like English and Spanish, for example. It's a common one. Actually, Tagalog and English is also a common one. So like it's totally possible. And then we'd speak with those authors.
Elle is bilingual. There you go, Elle. Go for it.
No, then I can't write in Spanish. I can listen to my grandma talk, and I'll just be like, "Did she just say that?" Like, but that's about as far as my Spanish goes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not very good. I'm conversational, but
yeah, I've heard you speak it before.
Yeah, I can't write to save my life in Spanish. I can really read it. A menu. I'm good with reading a menu, but like that's it. But that's really cool to know about the languages of Wattpad Next, and knowing that it is in 3 different languages. And it's, I mean, is there plan to move out into different languages? Like, is there ever going to be a French Next? Is there ever going to be an Italian Next? Or
for now, that's like a further in the future kind of a thing. But I would certainly say that it is not impossible.
I think it's once again a way that Wattpad is proving just how much of a leader they can be as it relates to cultural awareness, where we have voices from the communities telling stories for those communities. Like, that is, I can't really think of anything else that is providing that type of content. Can you, Jackie?
oh, sorry, content.
I mean, I didn't say your name. That didn't happen.
Oh, whatever. Everybody knows.
We're
that.
live. I can't
We're
edit
live.
it out.
It's fine. It's fine.
I'm sorry.
What was the question? I can't even remember. Oh,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. What was the question? I totally just lost it.
Just that, like, is there any other platform that's providing this level of the voice from the community writing the stories to the community?
No, I can't think of any. And I mean, I haven't been on that many sites. Does fanfiction.net count? Because I know that's where you and I both got our auspicious beginnings. But I have never heard of fanfiction.net's like powers that be coming down to talk to anybody. I've never heard of, what is it, AO3 coming down to talk to anybody. Swoon, I think, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But I am just always amazed by how many times I have been tapped on the shoulder for an opinion about something. And the community, I mean, is proof. The community boards are absolute proof that if you have a question, if you have an issue, there are not only like Wattpad HQ people running around trying to like search for these questions, but there's also ambassadors. And just the fact that the ambassadors program exists, I think that that's a huge way to tell your audience, like, we're looking for you. We're looking at you, and we're seeing your comments, and we want to do things and help. I'm still shook. That's okay. You're not the first person to out me. I outed myself today when I was in my classroom and I'm trying to project. I'm trying to show the kids V for Vendetta, because that one like explosion scene where they, you blow up Old Bailey because we're reading Macbeth, and then my projector just started showing. It was like Nick's conversation with me, and then it was my Twitter, and then it was like a draft of Arc 10 that I was working on, and I'm just like sitting there panicking, really trying to like quickly just shut everything down, and I was like close to just picking up my computer and throwing it across the room, just like stop, because nobody knows what I do.
Everybody at my job knows, so it doesn't.
Yeah, everybody at your job knows me. My kids don't know me here, unless there's any of them like here now that they saw me and my name.
Nick, you're listening to us banter back and forth, and this, and what Elle just said just a couple seconds ago about like how you guys approach the community. Like, why is that? Would you define that as like a core value of Wattpad? Like, how has that become part of the culture, that importance of communicating with your users and building these types of programs to serve writers?
I mean, like, we are a platform whose, by our very design, our goal is to basically connect readers and writers and kind of open up a space for them. But we can only open up that space. They both create the content and read it. So, they are the most important part of our platform at basically all times. We can make a very beautiful platform, but if nobody wants to use it necessarily, or if no one is using it, then it doesn't really matter. So we always have to make sure that we are listening to our community. That comes from basically the topic goes all the way through. I know that Alan is on Twitter and uses Wattpad as well and gets messages and answers them from the community all the time. It's written into basically like how we do anything. There's people all over the place who are constantly interviewing with somebody from Wattpad. Basically, any given week, there are always some interviews going on here where somebody is contacting someone from the Wattpad community. I think the other thing too is like a big reminder is that like we're Wattpadders too. So I've used Wattpad since 2011, but I've only been hired here since 2014. So, this is my home. This is kind of the platform I use even when I'm not working here. It's the reason that I like stay late in an empty office to talk and help out the community. So we're very much tied to this place. It's for a lot of us, it's where we read. It is our lives basically, as much as it is our work. So we have every incentive to be invested in the community.
Oh, that was actually something someone asked earlier was, Nick, what are some of the things that you're reading on Wattpad? And you as a content creator on Wattpad, would you ever consider being part of this next program, or are you eligible to be part of the next program? Sci-fi god.
When I started here, I said, when they asked me, I started here.
Oh, I know this story. This is a good story.
This is a good story. Are we going to talk about the fangirls again?
No, not that story.
Oh, damn it.
I started here with a vision in mind to say, like, 5 years from now, I really want some sort of system where people could just like write online and just get paid for doing that. Because as a writer, like that was the wall that I had hit personally, that I had created and I had connected with my audience. And I really, really loved writing Wattpad stories and stories for a Wattpad audience that I knew didn't necessarily have a home in traditional publishing. And I really enjoyed so much just having people say like, hey, I really love this chapter, or like, I super love it. Even if it was just one person just saying like, I really love this story, please write more of it, made me so happy that I was like, man, if they could just like pay me, that would be the greatest thing of all time. So for me, like this has kind of been a dream. It's what I've wanted to see. So I'm super happy to make that happen. As I've joked in the community, like I'll have to live with personally not being involved in it, and instead I just get to like nerd out about books all day here. So like I take that as an equal trade-off, as a fair trade-off. You know, I would personally love to have stories like my own included, if only because I like interesting stories and I like my own stories. That's why I write them. So there you go. That would clearly be very personally biased though. I write lots of content that people don't necessarily want to read in a lot of cases. And so, you know, not much would come of that. But in terms of like what I'm reading on Wattpad and what I really love on Wattpad, I'm mostly, as I kind of admitted to all the next authors right now, most of my days on Wattpad are not reading. I'm doing a lot of writing, so I'm trying to write a bunch. Most of my time is actually just, I open up Wattpad and I just flip through the carousel of next stories and just like look at them and enjoy that, and we'll open random ones and just kind of appreciate them. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. It's not necessarily reading, it's just kind of really enjoying the work that they've created. And like I have a sense of pride in this too, that it's amazing to see these stories out there, to know the work that's going on behind, and to know that people are supporting them, and that for a lot of these writers, like this is a dream come true.
Aw, those are your Wattpad next babies, huh?
I guess in that sense, I genuinely, I just open the carousel and I spin through and I just kind of look at them and have a time. But I do that almost every day at this point.
Have you had authors say that like this is a dream come true? Have they realized that like, wow, this is it for me? Like this is what I want to be and this is what I want to do?
Yeah, and they'll tell you. I think some of them have said it in their author's notes. They've written it in kind of that little message that pops up on every paywall you encounter, right? They have their own messages that they write to their audience that they want to tell people like, hey, thanks for supporting my story. This means so much to me. I'm pretty certain one of them just did an interview locally where she is. So like she's obviously very happy with what's going on. And you'll continue to hear more from the authors over time about how they feel in the program.
Yeah, we talked to Alfred Alley for a little bit, and I know that was really fun. I love talking to him for a while, and I'm sure we can have like interview a bunch more next authors and see where the program goes and how it's evolving and how it's changing for the authors themselves and the reader experience, I'm sure too. I mean, it's been good so far. I think the only negativity that we've seen is always coming from the reader's side when it's just like that shock of change and then they lose it. But yeah, the authors, go ahead.
Let's just bring an author on with a good story and just talk about story. Like I feel like our last couple episodes have all been good, right? But like we've been talking about like the aspects of mentorship and CPs, and now we're talking about next. Like I just want to talk about a story. Like let's bring somebody on with a really good story on next. So if anybody's listening and you're on next and you want to jump on with us, That would be awesome.
Or Nick, do you want to talk about what you're writing? Because you said you're writing a bunch now.
Ooh.
Yeah, let's hear. Let's hear.
I am writing a bunch of things. There is I think that all of the Next authors know about it. Maybe this is like a special bonus you get for just joining Next. I tell you about the secret writing projects that I have across Wattpad.
Ooh.
My secret profiles. So I am co-writing something with my own boss here because, again, like, this is what it's like here at Wattpad. This is what we do. So there is a secret story out there somewhere on Wattpad that
You and Samantha?
Nope.
No. Who's your boss?
Samantha.
Who's your boss?
So
He's not gonna tell us.
I'm not gonna tell you. And it's on a random profile. It's not on either of our profiles, so it's just out there. So I'm working on that, which has also been kind of probably depressing for a lot of my readers because, like, I can say that I am writing, but I'm clearly not updating any of my stories, which is not really great for them. Otherwise,
now your fans are gonna want to know where the content is. Hold on, pause. Are you ever gonna reveal this? Like,
Don't ask him. Don't ask him because he won't. Do you know how many times I've sat, like, how long I've had to sit in a chat room with him and just be like, Nick, come on, just one hint. Give me the first letter. Come on. I think it was like 3 days worth of me just like meme sealing at him, like that awkward seal face. And he's unmovable. He's unmovable. Shelly, I even told him my dog was sick and he's just like, I can't tell you. He's immovable and it's really frustrating. I thought I had the ability to move people. Nothing.
Yeah. So it's out there. And as I said, I have told Wattpad Next authors, so if they're paying attention and if you can break them, they might tell you.
Gavin!
And so
Gavin, tell us.
They might come pouring out and expose us, or they might all like have fun keeping it a secret if they want to, or people can encounter it. I know there are some other people out there who have found it and know that we're writing it. So that one's fun. It is like a science fantasy epic space thing going on. It's just like we threw a lot of really crazy ideas in a sheet, and it's just brainstormed like mad and produced a result. So that one's really fun. We're enjoying writing that. And then I'm oscillating back and forth between writing some of my very serious dark science fiction and another one where I wanted to try my hand in my own take on kind of the MMORPG stuff by explicitly not doing that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'm also writing, like I said, I have this weak point for like cute AF stuff. And so I'm writing,
kawaii.
There you go. I'm writing, what's it called? The Player's Roommate, which is so much fun to write. As someone who's written almost exclusively like serious science fiction or horror, or even like comedic science fiction, sort of, it's so different and so much fun to just write pure fun romance, and it's super enjoyable. I get a huge kick out of writing that content, and I get such a kick out of the comments of people enjoying it because it's just a very different commenting experience compared to science fiction and how people.
Right. Maybe I should try romance. No, it wouldn't work. Something would have to be lit on fire.
Somebody would be dead.
There would have to be fires, explosions. Like I wouldn't do it right. It wouldn't. No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, see, that's why Bloodback Mountain has to become a thing because they're already the undead. It's as dark as it can go. Now you can just focus on being cute AF. Like,
yeah, I think it's a really great challenge for a lot of writers who don't normally write in romance, and vice versa. I think, having to write a story where you can't just like kill a character to move some plot. You have to have the deep intricacies of like the tiniest of movements, or certain facial expressions, meaning more than like a bomb going off, is a really difficult small world to write about, and a whole unique and new and different challenge in and of itself. And I think the opposite's true. I think for a lot of romance writers to like go into this space of like bombs exploding and people dying and like a zombie apocalypse, and to write no romance can be kind of a very uniquely different experience. But I'm sure someone will hear this and just be like, I write both and I find them both equally the same. So that might be true too. This could be a very individual experience.
I just like violence and blowing stuff up.
Well, as I said to the cupcake analogy, right? You right to you, whatever, that's red velvet cupcakes for you, and
dripping with the red.
That's what you would go with, right? But
yes,
that would be my point, right? For you as that kind of person, and this doesn't just apply to Next, it applies to like all of writing on Wattpad. Like, don't write romance because you're just like, hey, people like romance. It's a pretty popular genre just worldwide. I'm gonna write it, but it's not who you are. Don't write that. Write who you are and write your best story. kind of the number one way that people find content is because their friend told them to read it. And so that's really frustrating for writers because it's like literally invisible and you have absolutely no control over it. Basically, you can't like click a button, you can't change a cover. It's just like someone reads it and they tell their friend, oh my God, you have to read this book. And so what I say is basically like, make sure that your story is ready so that when that person finds it and says, oh my God, I have to tell everyone, that is their reaction.
Right.
Shelly, I just have to quickly say one of the final things. I know we only have like 4 minutes left of this. So to wrap up, I want to, first of all, just say there was one comment that I think you'd appreciate. And as we're talking about it's violent and blood dripping cupcakes, Black Indigo 7 says, Cersei's quote, I choose violence.
Yeah. I'm a Lannister. I'm a Lannister. Okay, sorry.
I know.
I have a Lannister banner in my classroom. It's true.
See, I work at a school where most of those kids have never seen Game of Thrones, so I can't have my banners up. I have my house up. That's okay. Ravenclaw. Anyone else? Ravenclaw? No.
Oh, God.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. I'll just be my Harry Potter self. That's fine.
What about you, Nick? What are your allegiances?
Yeah. What house do you belong to? What family are you in?
Yeah,
I'm Slytherin.
I'm in neither of those.
Damn it, Nick.
I'm in that cute AF camp. So, I mean, I've already dropped a Bakuman reference, so you can probably figure out where I sit.
I mean, I do that too, but we can have more than one fandom. Like, isn't that like we can branch into multiple fandoms? Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just a nerd.
No, that's life. Multiple fandoms, basically.
All the fandoms.
Yeah, I don't have any that involve houses or ways to classify me, though.
Oh, damn it.
Sorry.
Fine, Nick. We'll accept it. Well, okay. So this has been so interesting. And
Yeah.
I know like all these questions we pulled from the community, and thank you guys, everyone who's been here and chatting with us. It's been a blast. There's no other way to say this. I'm having fun. Ooh, Nick, someone called you Hufflepuff.
She's also drunk.
Shut up. Nick, someone called you Hufflepuff. I could see that actually. Shelly, what do you think?
He's more Ravenclaw to me.
No, see, he has Slytherin tendencies.
I'm
That's the thing.
Slytherin. I
I
know a
know you're
Slytherin when I see one.
I think probably the best solution would be to send a message to Sam because she's worked with me long enough and she knows all the houses by heart.
That's
and
true.
she can just tell you which one I appropriately belong to.
I'm gonna say that. Ooh, Niabin said, I'm probably pronouncing that really wrong. Niabin is saying that you're Hufflepuff because you're helpful and you're loyal to your Wattpad people and your Wattpad next babies. You have been sorted Hufflepuff.
That's fair.
I'm okay with that.
I'm glad I was helpful. I'm glad people took this as helpful and useful for them. I hope it helps everyone who encounters it.
Niabin. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Pronunciation guide in the chat.
I know. Well, I've been butchering everyone else's names all night long, so I appreciate it. I'm really sorry. Any other last questions, Shelly, that you have? Any last thoughts?
What's next for you?
For me personally?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will keep on writing. I will keep on running this program. I will get married at some point too.
Yeah, that's right.
That'll be my life.
Is there a date?
Yes, it's in 2020.
2020. Okay.
It's in
So
April.
you got a while.
Yeah, got a while. So,
Good.
yeah, there we go. That's the kind of life I have.
That's a good life.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I'll go home. I'll have the cat. Cat will be the same. Still an asshole. But that's
They all are. They all are.
That's not true.
I'm not a cat person.
I know.
It's okay. Well,
right.
This is good, Nick. I hope you have fun with your cat and your fiance and your house and leaving work. Please take Amanda with you if she's not already gone.
Thank you.
Send her out of the building.
Thank you. I think some people hung around to watch this in another room. So
That's awkward.
That's awkward.
They all know your real name now.
That's fine.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
This is my life today.
I love you.
But I'm glad I could help out. Thank you also for both of you for doing this for the community.
One last question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but
Oh God, here we go.
okay, this is from Jody, so I have to ask it. Are you in the after movie?
Personally, am I in? No.
Damn it.
Okay. I can't spoil anything because I don't know. I don't know if that would be amazing. I would find that amazing if someone told us here, like some Wattpad staff is in the movie. I do not know that. That would be a total shock to me as well. But I am not. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Aw.
Okay. Well, you know what? If Wattpad ever decides to make Arc 10 a movie, I would cast all of you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for the casting.
Yes, it would be great. Okay. Well, it's 8:01. We've stayed past our time. Thank you guys, everyone, so much. And Nick, thank you. Thank you for joining us and choosing us to talk tonight. And we are so happy.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone for tuning in as well. And thanks to the community for asking all these questions. You
Great
can keep on
questions.
Talking to me in wattpadwriters.com. You can continue to find news and updates, and you can look forward to more updates on the program as a whole.
Awesome. Look into that. Okay. Or follow the Writers Excel podcast.
Yeah, that too.
That too. That thing that we do. Follow the Writers Excel podcast. We've got tons of more content. You can see all the episodes. We have Nick on twice. This is the third time we've talked to him. All about different elements and aspects of Wattpad and Wattpad community. So if you ever follow us on Twitter, the Writers Excel, on Wattpad, we are the Writers Excel. All that stuff.
Good
All that
plugs.
stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, bye all.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.